Hello friends, welcome to the software world. I'm Jimdo. Here, I'm on a mission to make connections between the software industry and our individual and unique lives. We all have a common goal of solving problems with software. Whatever happens on our journeys will not stay mysterious anymore. Hello again. My guest is Jim Allen. Jim is a results-driven leader, and he is passionate about forward-thinking technologies, teams, and businesses. He worked as a developer and founded his own company, and later on worked as a director of engineering, development manager, senior platform product manager, director of application architecture, director of technology, CTO, engineering manager, and currently he is the head of engineering at Jimdo, where we have met with him. As you see, he has a variety of experience in the industry. He also has a podcast called Yet Another Management Podcast, in short, YAMP. You may remember our talk with Dennis Bankert. Together with Jim and Dennis, they are co-hosting YAMP, and they are talking about managing and navigating the world of software engineering. Definitely go check out their podcast. You can also reach Jim via Twitter at Jim Allen. In this episode today, we talk about leading changes in the organizations and challenges and reasons for these changes. So, let's dive in. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you. Good to be here.
I'm really glad that you're here. And today our topic is changing organizations or managing the change in the organizations. And I'm really happy or feel privileged that you're here.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm a huge fan of your work, so it's an honor to get to chat with you in this capacity.
Thank you. Last time when we talked with Dennis, you also have a podcast with Dennis Bankert.
We do, yeah.
Yeah, and then I like your podcast too. I promised Dennis to listen the last episode that you did, and I did afterwards to keep my promise, and I quite enjoyed it, to be honest. I hope you continue on that part.
We will. It's been a little bit of a scheduling challenge, but I really enjoy it. And I'll speak for Dennis here. We expect you to come join us for a podcast one of these days.
I would love to. Yeah. Cool. Nice. I want to jump into the topic because we have, in my opinion, a pretty good topic today. And I want to start of course, I'm going to start in the usual or classic way, or maybe straightforward way, and asking you, what are the reasons for organization to change? Like, why organizations wants to change or need a change?
It's a good question. I think there's a ton of reasons. I mean, all the way from the easy ones are budgetary challenges, resource challenges from over-resourcing, under-resourcing. Those are the easy ones to kind of bang out there. But the hard ones are when you don't have the right folks in the right seats, right? Like, or your teams are misbalanced in a way. Those are the ones that are a little bit harder to A, identify, and B, to pull off with getting everyone on the same page. I call them HR changes, the layoffs and restructurings that way. Those are somewhat easy, not easy personally, because they really suck. Mm-hmm. But those are pretty binary. You either do them or you don't. The rebalancing of the teams and changing how the teams look and how they act, or what they work on, or the shape of them, or those are harder, and they're harder to pull off without damaging relationships and without demoralizing the entire staff. And I think those are the ones that I think about at night, the ones that I've been through.
That's pretty much different than my thoughts. My initial thoughts is when I think about changes or the why organizations need changes, that's HR part didn't came to my mind. When I thought about it, I just immediately said, okay, most probably in the organizations grow. I think which comes to the point of HR as well. Yeah. But yeah, organizations grow or there's something going on wrong, or the company's struggling, then you need a dramatic change in a way you do business.
Yeah, exactly. I lump most of those into, we can separate out kind of organic growth and even inorganic growth from those. But I think, the budgetary issues and the entire organization failing and needing to cut costs, those in my mind are kind of HR-ish type related organizational changes that just suck. I mean, it's a hard situation. No one enjoys it. And, at that point, you're putting your organizational hat on and just trying to get the business to survive.
Yeah, changes are pretty much difficult every time. So it doesn't matter the reason. It's like, I think I've been in a couple of changes by myself. In organizational changes, and I've never seen. I've seen that it's enjoyable, but most of the time there are like many painful points, and especially for leaders to take these points into an account and also evaluate them and to see that that's working or not, the changes.
Yeah, organizational change it really comes down to a few things. Relationships are key, and communication styles. Helping folks understand why the reasoning behind organizational change is super key. And if you've spent time outside of when you need to rely on these relationships, building these relationships, with the folks who directly report to you, if you're in leadership, or your peers, or even folks that report to you through another line, it becomes significantly easier if you already have kind of that. The analogy I like to use is that jar of marbles, where you're filling up this jar of marbles of trust. And if you're doing this before you need it, it's ideal. And then you can take some out, and you can say, I'm going to use a little bit of my trust here. Here's the reasons we're doing these. Please trust me. This is the right way to do it, at least in my opinion. And I'm responsible for making these decisions. And that helps a ton. I've been in both situations where either I was new, or the folks that were reporting to me were new, or the folks I was reporting to are new. And when you don't have that trust at the outset of organizational changes, it is so much more difficult. It's, the best piece of advice I got when moving into any sort of technical leadership role was, don't land and do you cuss on your podcast? Because I was getting ready to, but don't make a shit ton of changes, right?
Yeah.
Immediately learn, watch. Sometimes you have to when you come in with a mandate from the rest of the organization, but the ideal situation is to listen, watch, build relationships, get the lines of communication open, and try to understand what's going on, and then make changes.
This sounded pretty much, yeah. I mean, for me, it is a trust part. I was always thinking like it's an insurance that you need to have, and now when you mention that, now I can understand what type of insurance it is, like the ones that, at least in Germany, that we have these low full insurances. Basically, you need to pay to get insurance. And in any case, you need a lawyer, and your insurance pays this. And then for this one, to make it work, so you need to pay 3 months without having anything. So basically, it's like building a trust in the beginning with your insurance, and same as in organizations. Now I understand it a little bit better. So if you just try to go in the beginning, start your insurance, and then try to hire a lawyer, you cannot. It doesn't work in any way. You need to pay your money by yourself. You cannot use the insurance. And trust is, since I have this analogy in my mind, having the trust and thinking like it's an insurance that you need to pay in time, all the time, to be able to use it when you need it.
It's a great analogy for Germany with all the insurances we have here. But I was laughing at myself thinking about that. Yeah, no, it's absolutely correct. And if you miss a premium payment, the insurance company starts looking at you differently, and eventually they're going to cut you off. And it's the same thing with trust. It's like, whether it's up, down, across, it doesn't matter. You have to build relationships in every single direction. The folks who I work with are probably sick of hearing me talk about relationships, but it's just so key in what we do. I mean, it's software, but really it's about relationships. It's about trying to understand motivations and help folks understand where you're coming from. The software part is fairly easy. It's a lot of it's been solved, but the people part, the relationship part, that's the real work.
Yeah, it's more like everything is, so in software parts, some things are certain more, but in relationships, every relationship is unique and its own nature. So that's why you cannot put a formula on it saying that this will be the way that we are going to handle in every relationship, and you need them in any way.
Yeah, my wife gives me a hard time because sometimes I was like, why can't people just be binary? Is it 1 or 0? Is it are we good or are we not? And there's gray area with everything, and in that gray area, there's a ton of opportunity to either grow or to shoot yourself in the foot. And that's what I love about what we do. Is that gray area is where I like to operate, because I think that's where you learn the most. That's the biggest opportunity.
Exactly. Yes, I want to, since you mentioned the gray area, I want to I have one question in mind. In this gray area, so we are talking about changing organizations, having trust, and many things are not really certain, especially in a time that you want to change things because you don't know the future, what's coming, and how your changes will have an impact on the company and also in the future. So how do you decide that you need this restructure or a change in the organization within all these mist?
It's a good question, and there's not a great answer for it. Some of it is honestly gut feeling. And if you have the luxury of the relationships in place, being able to have conversations with peers and the folks you report to, and even though I try to when folks that are reporting to me, where I can have conversations without freaking them out about these types of things, because it's hard. That's the key, is trying to understand actually what's happening and where the problems are. Where the software side of it is super interesting for me is the data to back it up. And I think looking at process data about what you are doing or not doing effectively is a big part of this. And a lot of organizations are missing this. They're missing an opportunity to instrument certain processes so that you can look at them somewhat objectively. There's always, again, but we're back to the gray area where the data is a piece of what you can look at, but it's far from everything. Some of it is still relationship, some of it's gut, some of it's consultation with others. But I don't think there's a great answer for when.
No, it is
not satisfying. But
of course. I mean, it's since the environment is like if it's in a cloudy environment or in a mist, it's gonna be like I don't know, like a really tough decision, I would say. But I'm glad that you mentioned data, to be honest, because now I'm curious. What data points can we look at when we say, okay, we want the change in the organization? So to make this decision more accurate, which data points are more suitable, or what can we look at it?
It really depends on how you measure what you're doing per organization. If you're using OKRs versus if you're using Scrum. I do think velocity, and I'll tell you how I measure velocity is an important piece, because it's kind of system agnostic. And I'll preface this with 100% I have a bias for DevOps. So that's kind of where this is coming from. And it's stolen almost 100% from the Dora report and the Accelerate book. But I do think that the frequency at which you develop is a key indicator. I also like to look at the number of comments and on a pull request. I like to look at the number of pull requests, the lead time for a pull request. How long is a pull request sitting out there? You have to have a baseline for all these things. But if you see significant changes in those, something's going on.
So when you're looking at these metrics, what would be your baseline? Like, what do you see that you tell yourself there's something that we need to change here?
Any movement one way or the other. Ideally, I mean, if you're optimizing for trying to go faster, then going up is good. But if you see large spikes, if you see let's take deployment frequency, for example. If you see large spikes or a steep drop, then over a longer time period. Obviously, this is longer than a week by week time period. I would start asking questions about what's going on. Comments on pull requests are super interesting because they can go both ways. Either they're really good, you have a super engaged team or set of teams, or really good in if you don't have any comments, then they're pairing usually in that case. And they get things pretty much right when they're submitting the pull request. But this is another one where you're looking for trends or changes over a trend line. If you see something going sharply up or sharply down over multiple periods of time, I would probably poke a little bit there and find out what's going on. At least have a conversation with the leaders of the team.
These changes actually. Or the data points or metrics that you're looking at mostly focuses on incremental things. Like in software, if you look at the pull request or lead time or number of comments, these are generally the things that is going incrementally. So you have some metrics, but whatever you want to change, you don't see a dramatic change right at the moment. And when I think about changing, in the organization in the same way, considering a big change Is it something that okay, or also do you need to do this incrementally, like by looking at the data or anything, or you want to, or is it better that you have a big bang changes?
Yeah, it really depends. I'm in general, I'm a fan of big bang changes because it's effectively pulling a band-aid, and there'll be a painful period. You work on your relationships, you rebuild, you get to a point where you're starting to level off, and teams start to get back to whatever normal should be. But I've seen that go wrong, and I've seen that go right. I've also seen incremental changes work fantastic. But the majority of time when I've seen incremental changes, it adds confusion about role clarity, about, responsibilities from a team standpoint. And obviously this all depends, but I would probably lean more towards big bang changes, just so everyone has a chance to work with each other and talk through changes together. And then hopefully you move past kind of that painful period.
Yeah.
Or uncomfortable. Let's not even call it painful. It's uncomfortable. I mean, change.
Yes.
Let's be clear. Change is uncomfortable. Sure. We're humans, and so it's, especially if your world gets turned upside down about what you're doing and how you're doing it, and you are relatively comfortable. It's uncomfortable, and that's okay. But you have a responsibility as a leader to help folks manage that pain or uncomfortableness and let them know that everything's going to be okay, and we have a plan, and help execute on that plan.
For me, at least, this, like, I was never a fan of big bang changes, to be honest. This, like, because I've been in a big bang changes a couple of times, and I must admit, by the way, that most of them went pretty much in a great way. So I'm more on the side of being an individual contributor, for example, then you are the person that is mostly affected by the most, because your way of working, as you said, is changes, and everything that you do is now changing, and there are many things that you need to adapt. But like when I think about software, or in a software development mindset, it is always incremental changes are oftentimes better. But in organizations, now when I think back, I think I will start to agree that big bang changes are good, but if you are very comfortable that it's going to work, because I see that that's like one of the riskiest things that you take. And if you don't have the trust that you mentioned, it will never work, even though your changes are pretty much perfect, let's say.
Yeah, it's all predicated on trust. I mean, that's the key to be able to pull off a big bang change successfully. You have to have some level of trust, or you have to have multiplier leadership in leaders in the organization helping evangelize the change and helping folks understand why and how it affects them. And that's really the
Can you elaborate on a little bit the multiplier leaders? What is multiplier leader?
Yeah. My version of a multiplier leader is a little bit different. It's effectively an evangelist for whatever idea that you're trying to implement, and it's someone who's bought into the idea, who has relationships across the organization where folks trust them, and they can spread kind of this message, and then the folks that buy into it from them have relationships and with people that trust them, and then effectively you're covering the entire organization by kind of a viral messaging. It can be used really poorly, and I've been in a situation where it has been used, because if at its worst, it's politics, right?
Exactly.
At its best, it's evangelism, and the fine line is being upfront about what you're trying to accomplish and being really, really clear about it. When you have a hidden agenda, that's when it's politics, and that's when it becomes very toxic.
So getting these multiplier leaders is a tricky job that requires clarity and also transparency. If you don't have those two, or maybe is there something else that I'm missing? Trust, of course. Yeah, I mean, of course. Yeah, talking about trust. Yeah, trust, transparency, and clarity. Then you won't get these multiplier leaders to be with you to expose the changes to the whole organization and also get buy-in from other people as well.
Yeah, they may say, because there's positional power here, that they'll do it, but they're not really on board. And, you're smart enough to see through someone who is not completely on board, hasn't really bought into an idea. So you're not going to buy that. And so that's the key. And you're back to filling the marble jar or the insurance and making sure that you're doing the right thing well before you need to use this.
Yeah, since we are talking about this like clarity and transparency, can you a little bit talk about how do you communicate these changes? Because this is one of the most important parts, but you now maybe have multiplier leaders with you, but in any way, if you have them or not, doesn't matter. You need to communicate these changes to organization. And
it's so hard. There's not a great answer for this, just to be clear. We're back to it depends. But for me, it's so there's two parts to this. Is what can you share previous to the Big Bang happening? How transparent can you be from a legal standpoint, from an HR standpoint? Because there's always some sort of factor that plays into this. And so you have to be really careful with that. And that's kind of a hard needle. But what my preference always is to do it in person, have some sort of all hands. If it's an organizational wide change, an all hands, and talk about it. And then lay it out along with a written document so that because people learn and grok information differently. And so they can read it. And then follow up with small group setting, usually at a team, but you can do it even smaller, but small enough where people are going to be open and be able to ask questions and you can have real conversations about it. The smaller the group, the better. And I think this is an investment, and it's something that many organizations, they don't make this investment. And that's why I think many of these organizational changes fail. It takes strong technical leadership, strong HR leadership, and really a strong organization to be able to do all these things really well.
So pretty much what you're saying is basically, if I understand correctly, communicating the decisions or changes is a conversation. It's not a broadcast. And if you just make the broadcast part but don't have the conversations, then most probably it's going to fail.
That's also like a fine line. I mean, the decision has been made. You're not going to sway leadership in making a different decision. But what you want is to listen to the concerns and help people understand that you either have taken that's new information to you and you can take it back and think about it and come up with a solution, or help them understand that you had thought about it and these are the things that we need to do.
Yeah, of course. I mean, changes are not always welcomed, as we talked before. Like they're uncomfortable, and you need to find a way to approach people and get them aligned with you on the changes that you, as a leader, you are doing in the organization.
Yep, and this is where the multiplier leaders really come in handy because they're doing this pre-work and helping people get okay with this, or at least somewhat comfortable with it. And then you can come in and have an open forum to talk about, the pain that you see or the uncomfortableness, and help. You're not going to make everyone happy. Full stop.
Yes.
Right? People are going to be pissed off at you for something, but all you can do as a leader is help them understand the benefits from your kind of your vantage point, what the benefits could and should be, and also just keep the door open for more communication and more conversation about this as they come across something new. Helping, I think one thing that is super key is that leaders, technology leaders in every facet of life are human beings also, and they make mistakes, they make oversights, and hopefully most leaders are willing to if they make a mistake or they didn't see something, are willing to help remedy it, whether it's a slight change to what you're doing, or maybe it's a misfit or something like that. I think those are the things that you have to be open as a leader to listening to and making changes to your plan.
Yeah, no, I cannot hold myself without asking this. What are the common mistakes then in this? Like, this is one of the mistakes that leaders make. And related to that, what was your biggest mistake when you lead a change in the organization? This one, and that one I'm curious about.
The biggest one I've made is also my biggest hiring mistake. I was trying to grow a startup very quickly, and I did not listen to my gut and hired a toxic person because I needed someone immediately to help effectively meet a deadline. And it was the biggest. I still think about that hire like every time I hire someone. And so it's like every time I've not listened to my gut, I've been I've paid the price. But that's my biggest mistake and there's two lessons there. There's one, listen to your gut, obviously. And then two, rushing into filling a position for business reasons. Culture is number 1, 2, and 3 of priority if you're trying to build a long-term business, and the business success depends on it. And so if you make a mistake, especially early on in building a team, and hire the wrong person, you have no chance at building a culture that's going to sustain a business.
Yeah, the hiring, I would say, for me at least, that is one of the most critical business functions, and it has to be done very well in any level of organization, and it is freaking hard. There is no good time for best hiring, or like there's always a problem, and you cannot make everyone happy. In this hiring process, you cannot find perfect candidate. You can find maybe sometimes you need to deal with the least worst person, that because of business reasons, that's your preference. Like, I think this is one of the cases for you. This was. But what are the mistakes that's more common? Like, besides hiring in the organization, like in the change actually in the business side?
I think dictating rather than a conversation is one of the biggest mistakes that an organization can make, especially on large scale changes. Or think like a reorg, dictating that without having conversations at a certain level and above is the key. I've seen that happen in very large organizations, and that's when these large enterprises get this reputation for being a kind of a people farm, and that's where this comes from. Is they don't care, the perceived lack of caring about the individual, and in some cases it's not just perceived, but because they're making changes to people's lives. You move someone's cheese and you don't care about it. That's where the perception of just not of I'm just a number. And that's really hard. Some of these companies, and I'm not going to name any names, but I've been part of some of these companies where this is the case. The culture pays dearly for it, and that's really hard. That's hard to come back from.
So basically, if I understand correctly, what you're saying from my perspective is, even though you're only thinking in business terms, changes always relates to people.
100%.
Whatever you do doesn't matter. You are maybe changing the organization aligning more with the business functionality structure, or in a way that you want to change your product teams or platforms. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It's always 100% people thinking.
It is about putting the right people together to get the business functions done the way that the organization sees fit. That's the key. And the people are the important part of that.
And you need competent people who can embrace this change.
Yes. Yeah, 100%. The idea of hiring, professionals is, it gets a bad rap. I want people who are proud to do their job in a professional way, but I want them to also bring their whole self to work. And that's something that gets left out of the professional moniker, I think.
Yeah, I want to move a little bit on the leader side, because we talked about from leader's perspective, but we didn't touch upon the leader itself. So changes mean sacrifices from one structure to changing to another one. Basically, you're sacrificing your current structure or many things that's already functioning. Basically, it's a sacrifice at the end. And since this starts, this restructuring or changing the organization starts with the leader, what must the leaders overcome mentally and emotionally to manage this?
I'm going to go the other way and say they have to separate out the people. A leader has a responsibility to the organization. They can't forget about the people. But when you're moving things around on a whiteboard of who sits where, that's when you have to separate out the people and try it. And you want to handle the changes in a humane way. That needs to be a given. But making sure that you you have the resources, and I use the term resources here, and I really kind of hate that term, but the resources in this case kind of fit because people are not resources. There's this thing that does this, and then you have people that fill that. But the separation there is key when you're doing kind of the design of the organization, and that's super key. And then I think one of the challenges is, depending on the level at which you sit in the organization, is being close enough to the metal to understand what these teams do and how it's going to affect them. And that's something that, once you get, I think, probably above even at a director level and above, it's really hard. And it takes a lot of, hopefully you're building relationships if you're a director, with your engineering managers and and the folks that report to them, so that you can have an idea of what's going on. But there are plenty of director level folks who don't have really any idea what their teams are doing from a day-to-day standpoint, and how a reorg will affect them. And that makes it really hard.
Okay, so basically you need kind of both one-on-ones with your engineering managers and also maybe this skip level meetings with the people who reports to engineering managers to get the gist of what's going on behind let's say under the hood, and then understand that your changes will be okay, and also get the buy-in when you have a chance, so that you have relationships.
Yep, that's exactly it. We're back to that R word.
By the way, I just have to mention that I don't like resources as well. as a word, I hate it.
I hate it also. It's like that and synergy are both two words that I hate, that I use probably too much. But in this particular scenario, and I think once you at a certain level of leadership, you have to have a split brain about this, about the people and the resource. And the resource could be a team. I don't think it has to be an individual, but you have to be able to say, when you have a lot of these types of structures of folks working together, I think there's a way you have to think about it.
Well,
it sucks, by the way.
Yeah. I mean, every answer in organizations or in relationship buildings is either it depends or it is unpleasant, or like all these vague words that we use. But I'm more curious about, besides this separation in leaders' mind regarding the people and also resources, making this switch in the right time between them, what else does the leaders have to overcome mentally, in their minds? I want to get into their minds a little bit more.
It depends on how long you've been doing it. And unfortunately, I've been through quite a few organizational changes, both the good ones and the bad ones. And there comes a point when you have to battle to be not be desensitized to it. And remembering, and we're back to the other side of the equation of resources versus people, remembering that people are people. And I think that's something that I keep in my mind a lot as we're thinking about doing anything that changes people's lives from a day-to-day standpoint, and how they will affect. And I think I'm lucky in that I have, senior leadership in my current position who thinks that way, and also my peers who think that way. So we hold each other accountable to make sure that we're thinking about those types of things. And I think that's, I know most technical leaders and most leaders in organizations struggle with that. Everyone I've talked to, they struggle with that because we're humans too, and we care about the people that we're working with. And it's more, I'm going to generalize, but I think most leaders have some sort of empathy and care about the folks that they're working with. If not, they're probably not folks I'd want to work with.
I hope they care. So otherwise, a leadership position, I think that's not very much suitable. And or maybe that's old style, tough person leader style. That's I don't like very much in these days.
Me either. And I think that's if you have the right HR folks working with them, regardless of whether they're empathetic or not, hopefully they're handling it the right way.
Hopefully. So one thing that I really liked from David Marquette, actually, is from the book Turn the Ship Around, is beginning. The David Marquette says in the book, is, I quote, beginning with an end in mind for the changes. Because in the book, David Marquette mentions a big change, especially in an army, that's the most strict organizations in the world. That's not going to change in any way, but somehow manages it. And when I read this quote, beginning with an end in mind, I immediately thought about, okay, that's how you start changing. You plan all the way through. Maybe not plan all the way through every time, but you have some place that you want to go. And since people who might listen to us right now, they might be leaders or not, or want to become a leader, what would be your recommendations, let's say top 3 recommendations for people who are thinking with a beginning, with an end in mind? They are starting to think with an end in mind. What would be your recommendations for people who wants to change or who are dealing with the change?
Specific to organizational change?
Exactly.
Well, every organizational change that I've been through was for a specific reason. And using that as a measuring stick for, are you solving that specific reason, is the key. And I think we're saying the same thing. And so what I have found and what I'm practicing right now is writing about that and laying that out in a way that you can scrutinize it and others can scrutinize it to make sure that it's the right thesis before you start messing with people's lives is the key. Sharing it in multiple ways, talking about it, finding folks to poke holes in it, and then working backwards. So that's one. Working backwards from there and finding your milestones to measure success is probably number 2. Trying to understand how will you see whether this is successful or not before having to get all the way to the end of whatever you're trying to change. And my third would be, figure out a way to measure the cultural impact of what you're doing. And that's really hard. No, I don't think anyone's really solved that yet. It could be a few canaries of folks that you trust in the organization on whether canary is probably the wrong word, but bellwether is probably a better word on how the winds are blowing and how people are feeling, and use that to help dictate how things are going. As you're going through these, hopefully you have multiple milestones to get to your end result. But I think that's it. Having milestones, trying to understand how to measure the cultural impact of the change, and then obviously understanding your thesis on what you're trying to accomplish is super key.
I think I love the most from those 3. I love the most working backwards because I'm a fan of writing, and I really think that writing shapes your thoughts. And I'm practicing also writing a lot. I'm glad that you mentioned that. And this is one of the best ways I've found. For some people it doesn't work, but for me at least it works pretty well. But working backwards and having these milestones I never thought about it. Thanks a lot, actually.
Yeah, writing is, and I'm a horrible writer, and it's something I desperately want to get better at. But even a horrible writer like me, I find a ton of benefit in the precision that it allows you when you're thinking through these changes. Like any major thing that I'm going through or working on, it probably comes from software design, because once I start drawing with UML or any other tool, things become much clearer for me. But I try to write about it first and put my thoughts down, even if it's in as simple as bullet points and a little bit of an outline. It's a great way to start, and then usually it ends up being more article-like, and I'm able to publish it so that others can read it or poke holes in it or not. But even if I don't share it, it's still a great way for me to make my thoughts more precise.
100% agree. This is like one of the best ways that I found that works in any way to shape your thoughts and make the many things clear with writing. Well, I enjoyed pretty much. Thanks a lot, Jim, for joining.
Yeah, no, this was a great conversation. Thank you.
If you liked this episode, please follow the show and share the episode with one of your friends, colleagues, or family members who might find it interesting. Until next time, take care.